The ceiling of the Great Hall showed a calm night sky, full of stars. Harry was halfway through his pumpkin juice when the stars shivered. Not in the ceiling, in the air itself. A deep sound rolled over the castle. It was not thunder. It was like the world had been hit with a giant drum. Forks clinked. Candles flickered. A few students laughed at first. Then every window on one side of the hall flashed white. McGonagall was already on her feet. Her chair scraped back so hard it tipped. "Everyone, remain seated," she said, sharp and steady. But the hall was already moving. Heads turned. People stood. Ron's mouth hung open. Hermione had one hand on her wand, and she looked angry at herself for being scared. The sound came again. This time, it had a long tail, like something burning the air. Then there was a crack that felt like it ran through Harry's ribs. The castle shook. Plates rattled. A stack of dishes slid. A second year screamed as a bowl fell and shattered. Dumbledore rose slowly, calm in a way that made the panic pause for a heartbeat. "Prefects," he said, voice clear. "Please guide your houses. Professors, with me." Harry pushed up from the bench without thinking. "Sit down, Potter," snapped Umbridge from the staff table, her smile tight like it was glued on. "This is a school matter." Harry ignored her. So did Hermione. Ron followed, because Ron always did, even when his face went pale. They burst out into the corridor with a wave of other students. Teachers moved fast. Flitwick's wand sent a thin line of light ahead like a guide rope. Snape glided instead of ran, black robes snapping behind him. Outside, the cold hit Harry's face. The sky over Hogwarts was torn by a bright streak, like a falling star that was too close. It was dropping fast, straight toward the grounds. Hagrid was already there, huge in the dark, looking up with a frown that meant trouble. "They ain't normal," he muttered. The streak hit beyond the Quidditch pitch, with a boom that shoved air into Harry's chest. Dirt and bits of stone jumped up like water in a splash. For a second, there was only ringing silence. Then the wind came, hot and sharp. Harry tasted smoke and wet grass. A few students tried to rush forward. McGonagall cut them off with a wide arm. "Back," she ordered. "All of you!" Harry stepped sideways, trying to see around her. The teachers moved like a wall. Dumbledore's cloak lifted in the wind. His eyes were fixed on the crater. Something moved inside it. A figure stood up. It was a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered. His clothes were strange, close-fitting, bright blue with red over it like a short cape. It looked like a costume from a play, except no one who wore it would look like a joke. He looked around slowly, as if checking where he was. His face had dirt on it, but he did not look hurt. Then a broken piece of stone slid from a damaged bit of wall near the edge of the pitch. It tipped and started to fall toward a cluster of students who had wandered too close. McGonagall raised her wand. The man moved. Harry barely saw him leave the crater. There was only a rush of air and a soft thump. The stone stopped in mid-fall, held in one hand like it weighed nothing. The man turned and set it down with care, like he was placing a sleeping cat. People froze. The man's eyes flicked to the students. His face tightened, not in anger, in focus. "You're safe," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried. "Please, step back." He did not sound like a wizard. He did not sound like a ghost. He sounded like someone used to crowds and fear. McGonagall's wand was still up. "Who are you?" she demanded. The man lifted both hands, palms open. "I don't want to fight," he said. "My name is Clark." Behind Harry, someone whispered, "Is he a muggle?" "Impossible," Hermione hissed. Did you see that?" Snape's eyes narrowed like he was looking at a stain no one else could see. Dumbledore stepped forward, slow and steady. "Welcome to Hogwarts," Dumbledore said. "If you truly mean no harm, Mr. Clark? Then you may find safety inside these walls. Clark's gaze moved over the castle towers, the moving silhouettes in the windows, the floating lanterns along the path. His jaw tensed, like he was trying to fit a puzzle piece into the wrong shape. "Thank you," he said. I don't know how I got here." McGonagall's voice cut in, clipped. "You arrived like a cannonball. That is how." A few students laughed, nervous. Clark blinked, then gave a small, sorry smile. "Fair," he said. Snape lifted his wand. "A simple test," he said softly. A thin thread of light snapped out. It was not a curse, not a hit meant to kill. It was the kind of spell teachers used to check if someone was glamored or hiding behind a trick. The light struck Clark's chest. Clark flinched, not like someone pretending, like someone surprised that anything could touch him. His eyes widened for half a second. Then he set his face again, controlled. Snape's stare sharpened. Dumbledore's gaze turned thoughtful. Harry felt something cold slide down his spine. Whatever this man was, magic could reach him. Far away, in a place with no windows and no warmth, a pale face tilted as if hearing a new note in the dark. Voldemort smiled. The next morning, Hogwarts looked normal if you did not look too closely, but the castle felt like it was holding its breath. Professor McGonagall marched Clark through the corridors as if she was escorting a very large, very strange student to detention. She did not let him drift behind. She did not let him wander. Clark tried to be polite. He kept his hands visible. He kept his voice low. He also kept looking everywhere at once. Portraits whispered as he passed. A knight in a frame shouted, "Invader!" until another portrait told him to shut up. Peeves floated upside down from a chandelier. "Ooh, Cape Man!" Peeves sang. "Crashed like a pudding, stood up like a king." McGonagall shot Peeves a glare that could have sliced stone. Peeves blew her a kiss and drifted away. Clark leaned slightly toward McGonagall. "Do you have spirits?" he asked. "Poltergeist," McGonagall said. "And he is a problem." "I have those too," Clark said, then stopped. "Well, not like that." McGonagall did not ask what he meant. She did not want to know. They reached the gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office. Dumbledore was already inside, waiting with a calm that made the room feel warmer. Fawkes the Phoenix watched from his perch, eyes bright. Snape stood near the shelves, arms folded, as if he had been there all night. Hermione was there too, because Hermione was always where answers might be. Harry and Ron had followed her, even though they had been told not to. Dumbledore's blue eyes flicked to them. He did not tell them to leave. "Mr. Clark," Dumbledore said, "please, sit." Clark hesitated. The chair looked normal. Everything here looked normal until it did something impossible. Then he sat carefully, like he did not trust the chair to stay a chair. Dumbledore folded his hands. "We will ask questions," he said. "You may choose how much to answer. But understand this. You arrived inside a world already at war." Clark's face tightened. "War?" he echoed. Snape gave a short, humorless sound. Of course he doesn't know. Hermione's eyes flashed at Snape, but she held her tongue. Dumbledore continued. "There is a wizard who calls himself Lord Voldemort," he said. "He seeks power. He seeks control. And he does not fear kindness." Clark's jaw clenched. "People like that exist everywhere," he said quietly. Harry watched him closely. Clark was older than Harry, but not old. He had the calm look of someone who had seen disasters and still chose to stand in front of them. Dumbledore nodded once. "Then you understand why we must be careful." Snape stepped forward. "And what are you?" he asked. Clark's eyes lifted. He did not bristle. He did not insult Snape back. "I'm not a wizard," he said. I'm not from here." "Clearly," Snape said. Clark took a slow breath. My world is called Earth, he said. I lived there. I worked there. I tried to protect it. You tried, Snape repeated, like the word tasted bad. Clark glanced at him. I did, he said. And I still do. Dumbledore's voice was mild. How did you arrive? Clark looked down at his hands. He flexed his fingers once, like he was checking he was real. I heard something, he said. A sound I couldn't place. Then I saw light, like a tear in the air. I tried to stop it. Then, he swallowed. Then I fell. Hermione leaned forward. A tear in the air? She repeated. Like a portal? Clark looked relieved that someone had a word for it. Yes, he said. Like that. Dumbledore turned his head slightly. There are places in our world that study such things, he said. The Department of Mysteries. But it is difficult. Clark nodded, absorbing it. Snape moved closer. You caught a stone one-handed, Snape said. You moved faster than any wizard I have ever seen. Explain. Clark's eyes flicked to Harry for a second, then back to Snape. He seemed to choose honesty. My body is different, he said. My strength is not from magic. It's from who I am. And who are you? Snape asked, voice like ice. Clark hesitated. Harry could tell that name mattered. I was born on a planet called Krypton, Clark said. It was destroyed. I was sent away as a baby. I was raised by good people. I chose a life where I help. Ron stared. You're an alien, he whispered, like the word might explode. Clark gave a small nod. Yes. Hermione's eyes were wide. That's... She stopped, because she had no safe word for it. Dumbledore did not look shocked. He looked curious. Mr. Clark, Dumbledore said gently, in our world, great power often invites great fear. Already, there are people who will want to use you. Clark's brow furrowed. Use me, he repeated. Snape's mouth curled. Welcome to politics. At the mention of fear, Harry remembered the way Clark flinched last night. What did Snape do? Harry blurted. That spell. It worked. Snape's eyes flashed. Mind your place. Dumbledore raised a hand. It is a fair question, he said. Clark's voice lowered. On my world, he said. Most weapons don't work on me. Ron made a choking sound. Hermione's fingers tightened around her wand. But magic, Clark continued, is different. I felt it. Like a push inside me. Hermione nodded slowly. Magic doesn't only hit the outside, she said. It can change things, bind things. It can affect your mind. Clark's expression turned serious. Then I need to be careful, he said. Snape's eyes narrowed even more. He looked like a man who had just found the crack in a wall. Dumbledore leaned back. We will proceed carefully, he said. First, we must ensure you are not under another's control. Second, we must ensure you understand our laws and customs. Third, we must decide where you may stay. Umbridge's voice floated up from a portrait frame in the corner, because she had somehow arranged to be invited into every conversation that mattered. Her round face smiled down, too sweet. What a fascinating matter, the portrait Umbridge said. The Ministry will be very interested. McGonagall's nostrils flared. This is a school issue, she said sharply. It is a national safety issue, Umbridge's portrait replied, still smiling. A strange man with a cape falls out of the sky. The public deserves protection. Clark blinked. Is she a recording? He asked quietly to Hermione. Hermione fought a grin. Sort of, she whispered. Don't encourage her. Dumbledore looked at the portrait. We will inform the Ministry once we have facts, he said. And if you do not? Umbridge asked. Dumbledore's tone stayed pleasant. Then we will still have facts. The portrait's smile tightened. I will pass that along." The portrait went still, but the room felt dirtier after it spoke. Clark looked at Dumbledore. "If your government thinks I'm dangerous," he said, "I can leave." "You cannot," Snape said at once. Clark's head turned. "Excuse me." Snape's eyes were flat. "If you leave, you become a weapon anyone can point. If you stay, we can watch you." Harry bristled. "He's not a thing," he snapped. Clark lifted a hand toward Harry, not to stop him, but to calm him. It was a simple gesture. It made Harry pause. "I understand," Clark said to Snape. "You don't know me." Snape's stare did not soften. Dumbledore's eyes moved between them. "Then we begin with trust built in steps," he said. "Mr. Clark will be our guest. He will not be treated as a prisoner. He will not roam freely without guidance. He will not be forced into ministry service." Clark nodded slowly. "I can agree to that," he said. "And," Dumbledore added, "you will not use your abilities inside the castle unless lives are at risk." Clark's eyebrows rose. "That's a lot," he said. "It is," Dumbledore replied. "But Hogwarts is a home. Power must be careful in a home." Clark looked around the office, at the books, at the old instruments, at the Phoenix, at the strange moving frames. He looked, for a second, like a man who had landed on another planet again. "All right," he said. "I'll be careful." Hermione's eyes flicked to the desk. "If you don't mind me asking," she said, voice polite but eager. "What do you do on your world? Before you protect it?" Clark hesitated, then reached into a pocket and pulled out something that looked like a flat, battered notebook. He held it up. "I write," he said. Ron frowned. "Like homework?" Clark almost smiled. "Like news," he said. "I tell people the truth about what happens." Hermione's eyes lit up. "A journalist," she breathed. Harry watched Clark's face. There was pride there, but also weight. Like words could save people, but sometimes they arrived too late. "So you'll write about us?" Ron asked, alarmed. Clark shook his head fast. "No," he said. "Not like that. I mean, I'd like to understand. I ask questions because I'm trying to place what's real." One of the portraits on the wall leaned in. "If you want a quote," the portrait said loudly, "tell them I always knew something like this would happen." Clark blinked. He looked at Hermione, then at Dumbledore. "Do they always talk?" "Most days," Dumbledore said, eyes amused. Clark opened his notebook like he was about to take notes. Then he saw the ink bottle on the desk and reached for a quill. He picked it up like it might bite him. Harry almost laughed. Almost. Then Snape moved again, wand in hand, and the room turned serious. "Further tests," Snape said. Clark's shoulders squared. "Fine," he said, "as long as you don't hurt students." Snape's eyes flicked to Harry. "As long as you don't," he said. The next hour was strange. Snape cast controlled spells. Not killing curses, not torture, but binding cords, sharp flashes, probing charms. Each one had a purpose. Clark did not fall over. He did not scream. But every time magic touched him, Harry saw the tiny changes. A flinch, a breath caught, a muscle tight. Magic mattered. McGonagall watched like a hawk. Hermione watched like she was memorizing everything. Dumbledore watched like he was measuring not Clark's power, but his patience. At the end, Snape lowered his wand. "He's not an illusion," Snape said. "He's not a wizard. He's not weak." "That part was clear," McGonagall said. Snape's eyes stayed on Clark. "And he can be affected," he added, quieter. Clark met his stare. "So can you," he said simply. Snape did not reply, but something in his face shifted, like he didn't like that Clark was right. Dumbledore stood. "Then our first day begins," he said. "And we will attempt, all of us, not to turn it into a disaster. By the weekend, Hogwarts had started to buzz with a new kind of rumor. Some students said Clark was a secret Auror. Some said he was a cursed muggle who had stolen a cape. Some said he was an escaped experiment from the Ministry. Fred and George Weasley tried to get him to smile by asking if he could fly them to London. Clark said very calmly, "No." Then he asked, "Why London?" "So we can avoid homework," Fred said. Clark stared at them for a long second, like he was deciding if this was a threat. Then he said, "That's not a good plan." George grinned. "He's a dad," he whispered to Fred, loud enough for Clark to hear. Clark sighed like someone who had heard worse. Harry noticed something else. Clark didn't rest the way others did. He stood at windows at night, looking out. He listened to the grounds. He moved when a student tripped on a stair and nearly fell. He caught them without anyone noticing. He was always watching, not in a creepy way, in a guard way. And that made Harry feel two things at once: safer and smaller. The Ministry did not like it. They sent letters. They sent demands. They sent Umbridge around the halls like she owned the air. And in the Daily Prophet, a headline screamed, "Mystery Sky Man at Hogwarts. Harry Potter involved again?" Clark read the paper once, jaw set. "They don't know my name," he said quietly. Hermione snorted. "They don't care," she said. Clark opened his notebook. "Then, I'll get the facts," he said. Ron stared. "You're going to interview the school?" Clark nodded like it was normal. "If I understand people," he said, "I can protect them better." Hermione's eyes sparkled. "That's actually reasonable," she admitted. Ron groaned. "Brilliant. Now we've got a flying reporter." The day of the first Hogsmeade weekend after the crash arrived under a gray sky. McGonagall tried to forbid half the school from going. Umbridge tried to forbid the rest. Dumbledore allowed it with extra guards because fear was already choking the castle. Clark stood near the gate in plain clothes that didn't quite fit right. He still looked too strong to be normal. His posture gave him away. His calm gave him away. Harry, Hermione, and Ron lined up with everyone else. "Is he coming?" Ron whispered. Hermione shrugged. "He said he would watch from a distance." Harry looked at Clark and saw his eyes flick toward the forest, then toward the road, then toward the students, like he was counting dangers. The gate opened. Students spilled into the path like water released from a dam. Hogsmeade smelled like cold air, chimney smoke, and sweets. Harry barely had time to notice it, because the cold changed. It dropped fast, like the world had been pushed into a freezer. People slowed. Breath turned white. A small child, too young to be a Hogwarts student, stood near the edge of the street with their mother. The child rubbed their arms and whimpered. Then Harry saw it. A black shape drifting above the rooftops. Another. And another. Dementors. They glided like they owned the air. The joy in Hogsmeade vanished so quickly, it was like someone had turned off a light. Students screamed. Some fell. Some backed into walls. A few older students tried to raise wands, hands shaking too much to aim. Harry's scar burned. He turned his head, searching, heart pounding. "Harry!" Hermione grabbed his arm. Then the first Dementor swooped low, right down the street, toward a cluster of students trapped between a wall and a fallen cart. Harry lifted his wand. "Expecto Patronum." His voice cracked. The silver shape flickered. Weak. The Dementor kept coming. And then the air snapped. Clark dropped from above like a red and blue blur, landing between the Dementor and the students. His boots hit hard enough to dent the frozen dirt. He did not punch. He did not charge. He spread his arms wide, like a shield made of a person. "Back away," he said, voice firm, not angry. "Now." The Dementor did not listen. It leaned in. It lowered its hood. Harry saw Clark's face change. The color drained from it. His eyes widened, not with fear of death, but with something colder. Like an old pain had opened. Clark swayed. Harry's stomach dropped. Magic could touch him. And Dementors were not just magic. They were despair. Clark's hands tightened into fists. He did not run. He forced himself forward one step. The Dementor's presence pressed harder. Harry felt it too, his own memories, the worst ones, crawling up his throat. Then a second wave hit the street. Not Dementors, spells. Green and red flashes slammed into shop fronts. Windows exploded. People screamed again, louder. Death Eaters. They were at the end of the street, masks shining, firing curses into the crowd to herd people like animals. "Move!" one shouted, voice warped by the mask. "Scatter them! Take the boy if you see him!" Harry ducked behind a barrel as stone shards rained down. Clark's head snapped toward the spells. His eyes tracked every flash, every scream. His face hardened. He launched upward. Not flying slow, not like a broom. He was a rocket. He shot over the street, cape snapping behind him, and in a blink he was above the Death Eaters. They looked up too late. Clark dropped into the middle of them and struck the ground with both feet. The shockwave was not magic. It was force. It cracked the snow and knocked them off balance. He moved like a storm. He grabbed a wand hand, twisted, and the wand flew away. He caught it and crushed it in his fist like a twig. He did it again. And again. He did not break bones. He did not rip masks off with rage. He disarmed them, fast and clean, sending bodies tumbling into snowbanks instead of into walls. But the Death Eaters had expected strength. They had brought magic. A rope of light snapped around Clark's chest. It dug in like a living chain. Clark grunted and stumbled. A second spell hit his shoulder like a hammer inside his body. His jaw clenched hard. The Death Eaters recoiled, realizing something at the same time. "It works," one hissed. "Magic works on him." Another breathed, almost excited. Clark ripped the glowing rope apart with raw strength, but it cost him a second. In that second, a masked figure fired a curse toward a group of students running across the street. Harry saw it. A red flash, slicing toward Ron and Hermione. Clark's head snapped. He crossed the space so fast he was just wind and color. He planted himself between them and the spell. The curse struck him in the back. Clark's whole body jolted like he'd been hit by a car. He didn't fall. He staggered one step, then another, fighting to stay upright. Hermione stared at him, horrified. "That shouldn't. It's magic," Harry gasped. "It doesn't care." Clark turned his head, breathing hard. His eyes met Harry's for a second. There was pain there, but also a clear choice. He looked past Harry to the crowd, to the Dementors, to the Death Eaters, to the children. Then he moved again. He grabbed the fallen cart with one hand and flung it sideways, not at anyone, but into a gap to block more curses. He tore a shop sign free and used it like a shield, angled to catch spell fire while students ran behind it. He scooped up 3 first years at once and carried them to a doorway in half a heartbeat. He lifted a chunk of fallen stone and set it as a wall. He worked like a rescue machine, but every time a Dementor drifted close, his movement slowed for a breath. And the Death Eaters noticed. They began to steer the Dementors closer, like dogs. Harry's lungs burned. He forced his wand up again. "Expecto Patronum!" This time his Patronus burst out stronger, silver and bright, shoving a Dementor back. Hermione's Patronus joined it, an otter flashing through the cold like a blade of light. A few Order members at the edges of town fired Patronuses too, the only thing that made the Dementors hesitate. Clark watched the silver light with wide eyes, like he had never seen hope made solid. "Do that," he said, voice tight. "Do more of that." "We're trying," Ron shouted, half crying, half furious. A Death Eater raised a wand and aimed at Harry. Clark heard it. He turned before Harry even saw the wand move. He shot forward, grabbed the Death Eater by the front of the robes, and lifted him off the ground. For a second, the whole street froze. Clark held him there, eyes level with the mask. "You stop," Clark said, low and controlled. "Right now." The Death Eater laughed, sharp and ugly. "You're strong," he sneered. "So what? You bleed when we say you bleed?" Clark's grip tightened. Snow fell from the man's boots as he kicked. Clark's eyes flicked to the crowd again. He forced his hand to relax. He dropped the Death Eater into the snow instead of into the sky. "I don't kill," Clark said. The Death Eater scrambled back, shocked by mercy more than by force. Then a new spell hit the street like a wave, wide and bright, meant to blind and scatter. It slammed into shop fronts and shattered glass. Clark lifted his arms to shield his eyes. In that instant, the Death Eaters did the smart thing. They ran. They vanished into smoke and swirling darkness, disapparating at the edges of the wards where it was barely possible. The Dementors drifted after them, pulled by the promise of fear. The cold began to lift, slow and reluctant. Harry's Patronus flickered out. He sagged against a wall, shaking. Hermione's hands trembled. Ron stared at the broken street like he couldn't understand it. Clark stood in the middle of Hogsmeade, chest rising and falling. His cape was torn at the edge. There was a scorch mark across his back where the curse had struck. He touched it with 2 fingers and sucked in a breath. Then he looked at Harry. Not like a stranger now, like a fellow soldier. "What are they?" Clark asked, voice quiet. "Death Eaters," Harry said, swallowing hard. "They work for Voldemort." Clark's face went still. "And the shadows?" he asked. "Dementors," Hermione said, voice shaky. "They feed on happiness." Clark stared down the street where the last of the cold had vanished. He looked, for the first time since he arrived, truly unsettled. "On my world," he said slowly, "I can stop a lot of things by being stronger." He looked at the broken windows, the crying child, the shaking students. "But this," he said, voice tightening, "is different." Above them, an owl beat its wings hard through the gray sky, carrying a rolled newspaper draft back toward London. And in a dark place where no one laughed, Voldemort listened to the reports with careful pleasure. Magic worked. The Sky Man could be hurt, and now the whole world had seen him. The Daily Prophet arrived the next morning like it always did. It slid under doors and slapped onto tables as if it owned the castle. Harry saw the front page before he even sat down. A moving photo showed a blur of red and blue in the middle of Hogsmeade, with people running and a shop window exploding behind them. The photo looped again and again. The figure in the center was too fast to see clearly, but the cape was clear. The way he stood in front of a curse was clear. The headline screamed, "Sky Man attacks in Hogsmeade! Ministry demands answers from Hogwarts!" Ron made a strangled sound. "Attacks? He saved everyone!" Hermione snatched the paper and skimmed so fast, her eyes looked like they were shaking. "It says," she read, voice tight, "that an unknown dangerous adult caused a public panic event, and that Dementors were responding to chaos." Harry's stomach twisted. They're blaming him for the Dementors? Neville leaned in from across the table, pale but angry. "My Gran wrote. She says the Ministry is saying Dumbledore is building a private army." Seamus muttered. "My mum says you're all mad to stay here." Hermione's hand crumpled the paper. "This is propaganda," she said. "They're scared, so they're lying." Harry looked down the table. Clark, still Clark to the school, sat near the staff area with McGonagall standing close, like she was guarding him and guarding everyone else at the same time. He wore plain clothes today, but he still looked like a man who could lift the castle if he tried. He held a copy of the Prophet, reading with a calm face that did not match the words. Harry watched his jaw tighten once, just once, like a muscle had decided to keep the anger inside. Clark folded the paper neatly, set it down, and looked up at the ceiling as if he was counting to 10. Then his eyes moved, slow and careful, and landed on Harry for half a second, not asking for help, just sharing the weight. Umbridge glided into the Great Hall like she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. Her pink cardigan looked almost bright enough to hurt. My, she said loudly, smile wide. What a dreadful incident. The Ministry is deeply concerned. McGonagall's face was stone. Umbridge walked toward Clark as if she was approaching a prize on display. "Mr. Clark," she cooed, "I'm sure you mean well, but the public cannot be expected to feel safe with unknown forces roaming free." Clark stood up. He did it slowly. He did not loom. But even slow, he looked big. "I didn't attack anyone," he said, voice calm. "I stopped people from getting hurt." Umbridge's smile did not change. Of course. Of course. Still, we must have rules." "We already have rules," McGonagall snapped. Umbridge's eyes flicked to McGonagall and back again, sweet as sugar. "New rules," she said. She raised her voice so the whole hall could hear. "Effective immediately, all students will remain within the castle grounds unless personally approved. The Ministry will also be sending specialists to assist with the safety of this school." A low wave of noise rose. Anger, fear, confusion. Clark looked at Dumbledore. Dumbledore had not yet arrived at the table. His seat was empty. Umbridge noticed that too. Her smile widened. Clark turned back to Umbridge. "I'm not your specialist," he said plainly. There was a quiet snap in the air. Not magic. Attention. Umbridge's voice turned softer. "Oh, my dear man, this isn't a choice. This is law." Clark's eyes stayed steady. "On my world," he said, "laws are meant to protect people, not control them." A few students gasped. A few smiled before they could stop themselves. Umbridge's cheeks pinked. "Your world is not our concern." Clark did not raise his voice. That made it worse for her. "It is," he said, "because I'm here." Umbridge opened her mouth. Dumbledore entered the Great Hall. He walked as if he had all the time in the world, but Harry saw the tightness around his eyes. "Dolores," Dumbledore said pleasantly, "what a busy morning you are having." Umbridge's smile snapped into place again. "Headmaster, the Ministry demands a meeting. Now." Dumbledore's gaze drifted to the students, to their faces, to the paper in Hermione's clenched hand. "Of course," Dumbledore said. "After breakfast." Umbridge's voice sharpened. "Now." Dumbledore's tone did not change. "After breakfast," he repeated. For a moment, it looked like Umbridge might explode. Instead, she smiled and nodded, and walked out as if she had won. Clark watched her go. His hands flexed once at his sides, then relaxed. Ron leaned toward Harry and whispered, "She's going to try to put a leash on him." Hermione whispered back, "And she's going to call it safety." Harry stared at his plate. He had no appetite. His scar did not hurt, but his mind felt itchy, like trouble was getting closer. Across the hall, Clark picked up his notebook again. He looked at it like it was a shield made of paper. Then he reached for a quill. The quill snapped in his fingers by accident. Clark blinked. He looked almost offended, like the quill had betrayed him. A few students snickered. Clark's mouth twitched. "Okay," he murmured to himself. "Gentle." He tried again with another quill, slower. This time it survived. Harry didn't know why, but the sight made his chest loosen a little. Just a little. Even the strongest person in the room could lose a fight to a feather. That afternoon, Dumbledore's office felt full in a way it usually didn't. Dumbledore sat behind his desk. McGonagall stood to one side. Snape stood to the other, arms folded, eyes like knives. Kingsley Shacklebolt was there, tall and calm, robe neat, face serious. He looked at Clark the way an Auror looked at an unknown spell. Careful, respectful, ready. And there was Umbridge, sitting too close to Dumbledore's desk like she owned it. "This is simple," Umbridge said, tapping her finger. "We take Mr. Clark into Ministry custody. We question him. We decide how to use him." Clark's head turned. "Use me," he said, flat. Umbridge beamed. "Protect the public," she corrected. Dumbledore folded his hands. "No." Umbridge's smile froze. "Headmaster." "No," Dumbledore repeated, still calm. "Mr. Clark is a guest under my protection. Hogwarts is not the Ministry's kennel." McGonagall's lips pressed into a thin line of approval. Snape's face did not change, but his eyes flicked once to Clark, then away, as if he was measuring how Clark handled power being defended for him. Kingsley spoke quietly. "The Dementors were not authorized," he said. "That is a fact. Whatever the Ministry prints, the truth is different." Umbridge laughed, light and false. "Oh, Kingsley, you always were idealistic." Kingsley's stare did not move. "And you always were dangerous," he said, just as soft. Umbridge's smile wobbled, then steadied again. She turned back to Clark. "Mr. Clark," she said, voice like honey. "You could do so much good if you simply cooperated. We can offer you protection, a place, resources." Clark's eyes narrowed slightly. "A cage," he said. "A partnership," Umbridge corrected. Clark looked at Dumbledore. "If I leave," he said, "you won't have to fight this political battle." Snape cut in immediately. "If you leave," he said, "you will be hunted, or worshipped, or both. And either way, people will die." Clark's gaze locked on Snape. "You keep assuming I'll lose control," Clark said. Snape's voice was low. "I assume everyone can lose control," he said. "That is why we survive." Dumbledore's eyes softened. "Severus," he warned gently. Snape did not apologize. He did not look away. Clark took a slow breath. "On my world," he said, "I've heard people call me a weapon before." Harry, who had slipped into the office behind a tapestry with Hermione and Ron, froze. He hadn't heard that tone in Clark's voice yet. It was not fear, it was hurt. Clark's eyes lifted. "I'm not a weapon," he said. "I'm a person. I chose this life." Umbridge leaned forward. "Then prove it," she said. "Sign a magical contract. Submit to wand checks. Wear a tracking charm." Clark stared at her. "I don't even have a wand," he said. Umbridge's smile was bright. "All the better. You won't mind regulation." Clark's hand tightened into a fist. Then he opened it again, controlled. "No," he said, simple as a wall. Umbridge's voice sharpened. "Then you are a threat." The word hung in the air. Dumbledore's voice cut through it, gentle but firm. "Enough," he said. He looked at Umbridge with a calm that made her seem small. "This meeting is over," Dumbledore said. "Mr. Clark will remain at Hogwarts. The Ministry may shout, it may print lies, it may send inspectors, but it will not take him." Umbridge rose, face pink. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. Dumbledore smiled faintly. "It would not be my first." Umbridge swept out of the room like a storm wrapped in lace. When she was gone, the office breathed again. Kingsley turned to Clark. "The Ministry will not stop," he said. "They are afraid. Fear makes people do foolish things." Clark nodded once. "I know," he said, "but I don't know how to fight it without pushing too hard." McGonagall's voice was crisp. Then do what you did in Hogsmeade, she said. Save people. Let that be the proof. Snape scoffed softly. Proof doesn't matter if no one wants to see it. Dumbledore's gaze turned thoughtful. Then we must also win the story, he said quietly. Clark's eyes flicked to him. The story, Clark echoed. Dumbledore nodded. Truth alone is not always loud enough, he said. But it is still our best weapon. Clark's fingers brushed his notebook. Then I'll do what I do, he said. Kingsley raised an eyebrow. Right? Clark gave a small, tired smile. Ask questions, he said. Snape's mouth curled. Try not to annoy every portrait in the castle. Clark glanced around the office as if the portraits might hear. A portrait coughed loudly. Too late, it said. Ron stifled a laugh behind the tapestry. That evening, Clark walked the corridors with Hermione at his side. Harry and Ron followed at a distance. They were supposed to be invisible. They were not. Hermione was talking fast, hands moving, as she explained the basics of wizard government. The ministry controls laws, she said, but it also controls the news, and schools, and sometimes people's jobs. If you make them look weak, they punish you for it. Clark listened, face serious. So they'd rather lie than admit they lost control of the Dementors, Clark said. Yes, Hermione said, because admitting it means people panic or ask questions. Clark nodded slowly. On my world, he said, we have people like that too. Hermione glanced at him. Do they print lies about you? Clark's eyes went distant for a second. Sometimes, he said. Sometimes they call me a god. Sometimes they call me a monster. Most days they call me something they can sell. Hermione frowned. Sell? Clark blinked, then seemed to realize she didn't have the same kind of world. Make people pay attention, he explained. Hermione nodded. Yes, that. They stopped near a portrait of a witch holding a cat. The witch looked them over with sharp eyes. Clark cleared his throat politely. Ma'am, he said, notebook ready. Did you see what happened in Hogsmeade? The witch sniffed. I saw children scream, she said. I saw grown men hide, Clark wrote. And the man in the cape, the witch's eyes narrowed. I saw him stand in front of spells, she said, like he thought pain was his job. Clark's pen paused. Hermione watched his face. The comment hit him harder than any curse had. He forced a small smile. Thank you, he said. The cat in the portrait yawned. Clark stepped away. Hermione walked with him again. You don't have to do this, Hermione said softly. I do, Clark said. If people are going to fear me, I want to know why. Not guessing. Not rumors. They passed a group of first years who stopped and stared. One boy whispered, Is he an Auror? Another whispered, Is he a giant? Clark crouched slightly so he wasn't towering. Hi, he said, friendly. I'm Clark. The first years jumped like they'd been caught stealing. Are you a wizard? The boy blurted. Clark shook his head. No, he said, but I'm here to help. The first year stared at his cape. Can you fly? The girl asked, voice small. Clark's mouth twitched. Yes, he admitted. Their eyes went huge. Ron muttered from behind a statue. We'll never hear the end of this. Clark looked at them. Please don't try it, he said, as if he had heard Ron clearly. Ron stiffened. He can hear through walls, Ron whispered, horrified. Hermione elbowed him. Stop talking about him like he's not right there. Clark stood and looked down the corridor, listening to something far away. His expression changed. Focus. Concern. What? Hermione asked. Clark hesitated, then chose honesty. I hear someone crying, he said. In a bathroom. Hermione's face softened. That happens, she said. A lot. Clark's eyes tightened. "It shouldn't," he said. He moved, slower than he could have moved. He knocked on the bathroom door with 2 fingers, gentle. A small voice snapped, "Go away." Clark kept his voice calm. "I'm not a teacher," he said. "And I'm not going to tell you off. I just heard you were upset." Silence. Then the door cracked open an inch. A Ravenclaw girl, red-eyed, stared at him like he might be a trick. Clark stayed still. "Do you want me to get someone you trust?" he asked. The girl's lip trembled. "Everyone keeps saying the Dementors came because of you," she whispered. "And if they come again, I... Clark's chest rose slowly. "They did not come because of me," he said. "They came because bad people chose to use them." The girl sniffed. "But if you weren't here..." Clark did not lie. "If I wasn't here," he said softly, "some people might have been hurt worse. But you're right about one thing. My presence changes things. And that's scary." The girl stared. Clark kept his voice steady. "I can't promise nothing bad will happen," he said. "I can promise I will do everything I can to stop it. And I can promise you that fear is not your fault." The girl's eyes filled again, but her shoulders lowered a fraction. Hermione watched, quiet. Harry felt something twist in his chest. Clark stood, nodded to the girl, and walked away. Ron whispered, "He's good at that." Harry whispered back, "He has to be." Later that night, Snape stood alone in his office, the fire low. He had a piece of parchment covered in tight writing. He had diagrams, notes, lists of spells and potions, and ward types. At the top, in sharp ink, he had written one word: Clark. He did not write friend. He did not write enemy. He wrote facts. He listed strengths: speed, strength, flight, heat, hearing. He listed risks. Magic affects him. Mind, magic unknown. Soul, magic unknown. Dementors slow him. He paused, quill hovering. Then he wrote, "Moral code. Will not kill." Snape stared at that line for a long time. "A weakness," he murmured, and the word did not sound like an insult. It sounded like a warning. A soft knock came at his door. Snape's wand was in his hand before the knock finished. Dumbledore entered without waiting. He looked tired. "I know what you're doing," Dumbledore said quietly. Snape did not hide the parchment. "Good," he said. Dumbledore stepped closer and looked down at the page. His eyes moved over the notes. "This could become poison," Dumbledore said. "It could become a shield," Snape replied. Dumbledore's gaze lifted. "You are planning for the day he turns," he said. Snape's eyes were flat. "I'm planning for the day someone forces him," Snape said, "or tricks him, or breaks him." Dumbledore sighed. "And if he never turns?" Snape's mouth tightened. "Then we are alive," he said. Dumbledore studied him. "You sound like you don't believe in hope," he said. Snape's voice lowered. "Hope is not a plan," he said. "But I'm not blind. He saved students." Dumbledore's eyes softened at that. Snape looked away. "That does not erase danger." Dumbledore nodded once, accepting the truth and the fear together. "Voldemort has noticed him," Dumbledore said. Snape's head snapped up. "How do you know?" Dumbledore's voice was calm. "Because the war always notices a new weapon," he said, "and because certain things have begun to move in the Department of Mysteries." Snape's eyes narrowed. "The department," he repeated. Dumbledore nodded. "Something reacted the night he arrived," he said. "A tremor in a place that should not tremor." Snape stared at the fire. "You want to go," he said. Dumbledore did not deny it. Snape's voice went sharp. "That place is not a corridor you stroll through," he said. "It is a trap even when it's empty." Dumbledore's gaze held. I know, he said. But if the tear that brought him here can open again, then it can open for something else. Snape's jaw clenched. Or someone else, he said. Dumbledore nodded. Snape's quill tapped the parchment once, hard. Then we do not take children, he said. Dumbledore's eyes flickered. No, he agreed. We do not. In a cold manor far from Hogwarts, a pale hand turned a newspaper slowly. Voldemort sat in a chair like it was a throne. He did not need warmth. He did not need comfort. Bellatrix knelt at his feet, eyes shining with worship. Lucius Malfoy stood nearby, trying to look calm while his fear sweated through his skin. The creature is strong, Lucius said carefully. Voldemort's red eyes scanned the moving photo. Strong, he echoed, almost bored. Bellatrix laughed softly. Let me fight him, she begged. Let me carve that pride out of him. Voldemort did not look at her. You already fought him, he said. You and your fools threw spells. You learned. Lucius swallowed. We learned magic works, he said quickly. Binding spells. Stunning spells. He reacts. Voldemort's fingers traced the edge of the paper. Yes, he said softly. Magic reaches him. Bellatrix leaned in, eager. Then we can kill him. Voldemort's smile was thin. Can we? He asked. Bellatrix froze, confused. Voldemort's voice turned smooth. He's not the problem, he said. The problem is what he does to the story. Lucius blinked. The story, my lord? Voldemort's eyes lifted. People see a protector, he said. A symbol. They see a man who stands in front of danger and does not fall. His voice sharpened. I built fear. He brings something else. Bellatrix's face twisted, offended. Fear is stronger, she hissed. Voldemort's gaze snapped to her. The air turned heavier. Fear is a leash, Voldemort said. Hope is a blade. It cuts leashes. Bellatrix went still. Voldemort leaned back. We do not crush him with force, he said. We use what reaches him. We use what he cannot punch. Lucius licked his lips. Dementor slowed him, he offered. They pressed on him. Voldemort's smile returned. Pleased. Yes, he murmured. Soul things. Mind things. Choices. He tapped the newspaper. And we take evidence, he said. A piece. A hair. Blood, if possible. Lucius's eyes widened. From him? Voldemort's voice was soft and deadly. From the Sky Man, he said. Because if we understand the rules of his body, we can write the rules of his suffering. Bellatrix shivered with joy. Voldemort's gaze drifted to the shadows. Bring me what I ask, he said, and prepare the next move. Not loud. Not foolish. He smiled, and it was colder than the Manor Stone. Personal, he whispered. The next day, Harry found Clark alone in an empty classroom, staring at a chalkboard as if it might explain the universe. Clark held a piece of chalk between two fingers. The chalk looked tiny there. On the board, Clark had drawn a simple circle, then a tear through it. Harry stepped in. You're drawing portals, he said. Clark turned. He did not look surprised. He looked like he had heard Harry coming from a mile away and pretended he hadn't. I'm trying to understand what happened, Clark said. Harry hesitated. Do you have a name? He asked. Like, not just Clark. Clark blinked. Then he smiled, small and tired. Yeah, he said. He pointed at the symbol on his chest. This is my family crest, he said. On my world, people can't read it. They just see a shape. Harry stared at it. What does it mean? He asked. Clark's voice softened. Hope, he said. Harry felt his throat tighten. He didn't know why. Maybe because hope sounded like a dangerous word here. And they call me. Clark paused, like he didn't want to sound full of himself. Superman, he said. Quiet. Harry's eyes widened. The word sounded simple, too simple for what Clark was. Superman, Harry repeated, half to himself. Clark gave a small shrug. It's just a name, he said. It's not what I am. It's what I try to do. Harry nodded slowly. People here might not like that name, he said. Clark's mouth twitched. People anywhere don't always like it, he said. Harry looked down. You could leave, he said, voice rough. You said it. You could just go. Clark's gaze steadied. And then what? He asked. Harry looked up. Clark's eyes were kind, but they were serious. You think I don't miss home? Clark asked quietly. I do. I miss it every second. He swallowed once. But I also hear things here, he said. Kids whispering that they're scared to sleep. Teachers trying to act normal. People pretending the truth isn't real because it's easier. Harry's chest tightened. Clark stepped closer, slow, like he didn't want to crowd Harry. I can't fix everything, he said, but I can stand here. And if standing here keeps one person from getting hurt, then I stay. Harry stared at him. Then Harry said the truth that tasted bitter. Magic can hurt you, he said. Clark nodded. Yeah, he admitted. Harry waited for fear. Clark gave him honesty instead. That makes this place real, he said. It means I have to think. It means I have to trust people who know more than me. He looked at the chalkboard. It also means whoever did this can do it again. Harry's scar prickled faintly. Clark turned back. Dumbledore told me about a place where mysteries are studied, he said. A place that might explain the Tear. Harry swallowed. The Department of Mysteries, he said. Clark watched Harry's face. You've heard of it, he said. Harry didn't answer. He had heard of it. He had dreamed of it. He had been pulled toward it like a hook. Clark's voice stayed steady. If that place is involved, he said, then we need answers before Voldemort gets them first. Hearing the name out loud made Harry's scar sting. Clark held Harry's gaze. I'm not asking you to fight, he said. I'm asking you to be careful, because I think the next move is coming. Harry nodded, and his stomach felt like it was full of stones. The war had noticed Clark, and now Clark had noticed the war. That night, Dumbledore stood with Kingsley and a small circle of Order members in a quiet room off a corridor. Clark stood with them. He looked too bright for the shadows, even in plain clothes. We go for information, Dumbledore said calmly. Not for glory. Not for battle. Battle may find us anyway, Moody growled from the corner, one eye whirring. Clark's voice was low. If it does, he said, I'll keep people alive. Snape's stare cut in. And if the place itself turns against you, he asked. Clark didn't pretend to know. Then I'll need you, he said simply. Snape looked almost offended by the honesty. Dumbledore's gaze moved around the group. We do this quietly, he said. We do not bring students. Harry, under the cloak outside the door with Hermione and Ron, felt Hermione's hand clamp onto his sleeve like a warning. They weren't supposed to be here, but they were, because that was who they were. Inside the room, Dumbledore raised his wand. The fireplace roared green, and the plan began. The Ministry building felt nothing like Hogwarts. It was colder. Not in air, in spirit. Hermione's stomach twisted as she stepped out of the flue into a corridor of dark stone, lit by cold lamps. She had come with Harry and Ron under the cloak, following the Order like shadows. They were not supposed to be here. But when they heard Department of Mysteries, Harry had gone still, in a way Hermione did not like. It was like a string in him had been pulled. Hermione had tried to talk him out of it. Ron had tried too. Harry had looked at them and said, if something happens and we're not there, I'll never forgive myself. So they followed, because that was what they did. Even when it was stupid. Even when it was dangerous. They stayed behind as the order moved ahead. Clark walked at Dumbledore's side like a silent guard. His eyes moved constantly, but his head barely turned. Hermione knew he was listening to everything. He tried not to, but his body did it anyway. They reached a door. Plain. Black. No handle. Dumbledore pressed his palm to it. The door opened without a sound. Inside, the air felt wrong. Not evil. Not friendly. Just wrong. It smelled like dust and metal and something old. Rows of shelves stretched into the dark, filled with small glass spheres. Prophecies. Hermione swallowed. She had read about them. Seeing them was worse, like seeing a graveyard of future mistakes. Clark stepped in and paused. His eyes narrowed. "I can't see through these shelves," he said quietly. Hermione blinked. "Why would you need to?" Clark hesitated. "I have vision that can look through things," he admitted, still careful with his words. "But something here blocks it." Moody grunted. "Good," he muttered. "Means the place has teeth." Clark's jaw tightened. "Means I can't rely on my usual tricks," he said. Dumbledore's voice was calm. "Then we rely on each other," he said. They moved deeper. The shelves hummed faintly, like they were alive. Hermione's heart thudded. Then a sound echoed. A laugh, high and bright, like someone enjoying pain. Bellatrix Lestrange stepped out from behind a shelf, wand raised, eyes shining. "Well," she sang, "look what fell from the sky." Moody's wand snapped up. Kingsley moved like a wall in front of a younger Order member. Clark's body shifted, instinct ready, but he did not rush forward yet. Hermione saw that pause. He was thinking. The place had rules he didn't know. Bellatrix's gaze raked over him. "You're pretty," she purred. "Big. Strong. I wonder what you sound like when you beg." Clark's voice was flat. "I don't beg," he said. Bellatrix giggled. "We'll see." From the shadows, more figures appeared. Masks. Death Eaters. They had planned this. Hermione's mouth went dry. "It's an ambush," she whispered. Harry's hand tightened on her arm under the cloak. Clark's head turned slightly, listening. "They're in the next room, too," he said quietly. "More than this." Snape's voice was low. "They wanted us inside," he said. Dumbledore's eyes were sharp behind his glasses. "Yes," he said. "And they may want something more than a fight." Bellatrix raised her wand. "Playtime!" she cried. Spells erupted. Red and green flashes streaked through the prophecy room. Glass spheres trembled on shelves as magic passed too close. Dumbledore's shield went up like a clear wall. It caught curses that would have torn people apart. Kingsley fired a stunning spell that slammed a Death Eater backward. Moody's curse knocked a wand out of a hand. Clark moved, not as a blur that smashed bodies, as a guardian. He crossed the room in a burst of wind and grabbed a flying curse midair by stepping into its path, taking the hit on his shoulder with a grunt. He staggered, but he stayed standing. Hermione felt sick at the sight. It was wrong to see someone like him hurt. Clark's eyes flashed. He reached out, caught a Death Eater's wrist before the wand could fire again, and twisted gently, but firmly. The wand clattered to the floor. Clark kicked it away. Bellatrix screamed with laughter and fired a rope of light. It snapped around Clark's chest like a living snake. Clark's muscles tightened. He grabbed the rope and yanked. The rope held for a second, digging into him, burning with magic. Clark's teeth clenched. Then it snapped apart in his hands. Bellatrix's eyes widened with delight. "Oh, you're fun!" a Death Eater shouted. "Not him! Move them!" Two Death Eaters aimed past Clark, at the shelves, at the prophecies. Hermione's blood turned cold. "They're going to break them!" she gasped. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "No!" he snapped, and his voice cracked like a whip. He sent a wave of magic that shoved the Death Eaters back from the shelves. but more spells came from the side. "Split them!" someone yelled. The Death Eaters weren't trying to win clean. They were trying to scatter the team through the department. The door behind them clicked. Locked. The shelves around them shuddered, and the floor beneath Hermione's feet seemed to tilt, just slightly, like the room wanted them to fall. Clark's head snapped left. "Behind!" he began. Too late. A side door opened on its own, as if invited. A gust of cold air pulled at them like a giant hand. Hermione stumbled. Harry grabbed her. Ron swore. Then Bellatrix fired a spell into the floor between the group. The stone burst upward. Hermione was thrown backward. She slammed into a shelf. Glass spheres rattled. Clark lunged. He caught the shelf with one hand, holding it steady so the prophecies wouldn't crash down. His arm shook under the strain, not because it was heavy, but because magic in the air felt like invisible hooks pulling at everything. Hermione pushed herself up, dizzy. Clark's eyes met hers for half a second. "Get behind me," he said. Then the room changed again. The door they had come through vanished, not closed. Gone. A blank wall stood there now. Moody cursed loudly. Kingsley's voice stayed controlled. "The department is shifting," he said. Dumbledore's eyes narrowed. "It is reacting," he murmured, "or being controlled." Bellatrix laughed and backed away, still firing spells. "Catch me if you can," she sang. Clark took one step, and the floor beneath him shimmered. For the first time, Hermione saw his speed falter without him choosing it. It was like the air thickened around his legs. Clark's eyes widened. "What is—" Then he vanished, not flying away. Pulled. 1 second he was there. The next he was gone through a doorway that had not existed a moment before. Hermione's heart stopped. "Clark!" she cried. Dumbledore turned sharply. "Stay together," he ordered. But the department did not care about orders. A wall rotated. A doorway opened. A wave of force slammed through the room, and Hermione, Harry, and Ron, still hidden under the cloak, were pushed sideways, tumbling through a door like leaves caught in wind. Hermione's last glimpse before the prophecy room disappeared was Bellatrix's grin, like she had gotten exactly what she wanted. Clark landed hard on cold stone. He rolled once, controlled, and came up on one knee. His cape dragged on the floor behind him. The room he had landed in was huge and dim. Blue light floated in the air like trapped mist. In the center stood a tall archway covered in old cloth that moved like it was breathing. Clark's skin prickled. His hearing caught whispers that made no sense, not words. More like a crowd far away, behind a wall. He stood slowly. This was not a room for fists. This was a room for endings. Clark took one careful step forward. A voice laughed from the shadows. "You're lost," Bellatrix sang. Clark turned. She stepped into view, wand raised, eyes wild. Behind her, 2 masked Death Eaters stood near the doors. They weren't attacking yet. They were waiting. Clark's jaw clenched. "Where are my friends?" he demanded. Bellatrix's smile widened. "Oh, they're having their own adventures," she said. "But you're special." She flicked her wand. A spell snapped toward Clark's head. Clark moved fast, dodging, but the spell clipped his shoulder. Pain shot through him like an electric bite under his skin. He grunted, steadying himself. Bellatrix clapped once. "It hurts!" she cried. "It hurts you!" Clark's eyes hardened. "I'm not here for you," he said. He launched forward. Bellatrix darted back, quick, laughing, firing spells like knives. Clark weaved between them, fast enough that the air snapped. But the room itself fought him. Every time he got too close to Bellatrix, the whispers grew louder. The archway seemed to pull at his attention like gravity on his mind. Clark's senses hated this place. He heard voices that weren't there. He saw the cloth ripple even when no wind moved. Bellatrix's eyes glittered. You feel it, don't you? She purred. That's death. Clark's chest tightened. He remembered too many faces, too many times he had been too late. He shook his head hard. I'm not afraid of you, he said. Bellatrix giggled. Good, she whispered. Because you should be afraid of choices. She pointed her wand past him. Clark's head snapped around. A figure stumbled through a doorway behind him. A man in dark robes. An Order member Clark recognized from the meeting. Not a student, but still someone he had promised to protect. The man's eyes were wide with panic. Behind him, a Death Eater shoved him forward with a curse. The man stumbled toward the arch, toward the whispering curtain. Clark's breath caught. He moved, fast, hard, true speed. He grabbed the man's collar and yanked him back from the arch with one arm, pulling him away like pulling someone back from a cliff. The man gasped, shaking. Clark set him down behind him. Bellatrix laughed, delighted. A hero, she cried. Always catching, always saving. Clark turned, furious now. You tried to throw him through that. He said. Bellatrix shrugged, like it was a game. It's a door, she said. Doors are meant to be used. Clark's eyes narrowed. That's not a door, he said. That's a grave. Bellatrix's smile sharpened. How would you know? She asked. Clark didn't answer. He didn't want to. Because part of him did know. Because everything about that arch felt like the end of a story. Clark's voice dropped. This is what Voldemort does, he said. He uses places like this to make people helpless. Bellatrix's eyes gleamed. And you, she whispered, are not used to helpless. Clark's fists tightened. Then he forced them open. He looked down at the shaken Order member behind him. Stay back, Clark said. He turned to Bellatrix again. I'm ending this, he said. Bellatrix's grin was wide. Try, she sang. Clark moved. He crossed the distance in a blink, grabbed Bellatrix's wand hand, and twisted. Bellatrix screamed, not in pain, but in excitement, and drove her wand forward with her other hand, jamming it toward Clark's ribs. A spell fired point blank. White-hot pain slammed through Clark's side. Clark gasped. His grip loosened for half a second. Bellatrix ripped free, spinning away, laughing like she had just won a prize. You bleed, she sang. Not like us, not like wizards, but you bleed. Clark pressed a hand to his side. There was no blood on his fingers, but the pain was deep, like magic had bruised his bones from the inside. He straightened anyway. His eyes were bright now, not with heat vision, but with resolve. Then I still stand, he said. Bellatrix's laughter faltered for a heartbeat, not because she feared his strength, because she hated what he was, a person who kept standing. Hermione landed on her hands and knees on cold stone. The air here smelled like metal and old paper. Harry was beside her, cloak half off, eyes wild. Ron groaned and pushed himself up. They were in a room full of doors, dozens of doors, identical. A spinning, shifting maze. The department, Hermione whispered, heart hammering. It's the rotating doors. Harry's scar throbbed faintly, like a warning bell. Ron turned in a slow circle. So which door's the right one? He demanded. Hermione's mouth was dry. I don't know, she admitted. A door clicked open. A masked figure stepped in, wand raised. Harry's wand snapped up instantly. Stupefy! The spell hit the Death Eater in the chest and knocked him backward, crashing into the door behind him. Hermione's eyes widened. Harry! Harry's face was set. They're here, he said. We can't hide. Another door opened, then another. Footsteps echoed. Ron swallowed hard. We're surrounded, he whispered. Hermione forced her mind to work through fear. They want us split, she said. They want us lost. Harry's eyes flashed. Then we don't get lost, he said. Hermione grabbed Ron's sleeve. "Stay close," she ordered. The three of them moved together, slipping through a door just as a curse slammed into the stone where they had been. They ran. Doors clicked and swung. Rooms changed. They burst into a room full of clocks, all ticking wrong. Hermione's stomach lurched. The air felt heavy, like time itself had weight. A small bird in a cage fluttered, then suddenly became a fluffy little chick, then a bird again. Ron stared, horrified. "Nope," he said, voice shaking. "Nope. I hate this." Hermione grabbed Harry's arm. "Don't touch anything," she hissed. A Death Eater stepped in behind them, wand raised. Harry fired again. The Death Eater dodged and threw a curse that cracked a clock in half. The shattered clock spilled sand onto the floor. The sand moved like it was alive. Hermione pulled Harry and Ron out of the room, slamming the door. They ran into another room, dark, round, with tanks of floating brains. Ron made a noise like he might throw up. Hermione's skin crawled. "Keep moving," she said. Harry's scar stabbed sharply. He stopped. His face went pale. "Hermione," he whispered. "He's here." Hermione's heart dropped. "Voldemort," she breathed. Harry nodded, eyes unfocused for a second. He wants the prophecy," he said, voice strained. "He wants it broken. He wants—" A door slammed open. Bellatrix's voice rang from somewhere far, laughing. Hermione grabbed Harry's shoulders. "Harry, look at me," she said, fierce. "You are here. Not in his head. You hear me?" Harry blinked hard. "Yeah," he rasped. Ron's hand shook on his wand. "We need to find Dumbledore," he said. Hermione swallowed. "And Clark," she said. A curse blasted through the wall beside them. Stone exploded. They sprinted again. Back in the prophecy room, Dumbledore fought like a storm held inside a quiet man. His spells were clean, precise, bright. He shielded his people. He bound Death Eaters. He redirected curses away from the shelves. But the Death Eaters were not trying to win in the normal way. They targeted the room itself. They fired at shelves to make them fall. They fired at the floor to crack it. They fired at doors to force them open and shift. Moody shouted, "They're making the department move!" Kingsley's voice was controlled. "They're guiding us into rooms we don't want." Snape's face was tight with anger. He hated being pushed. A Death Eater darted back, mask tilted, and shouted, "He's in the Veil Room!" Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "Clark," Dumbledore whispered. For the first time, a crack showed in his calm. Then the Death Eaters did what they had been waiting to do. They slammed a curse into a shelf. Glass spheres fell. Prophecies shattered. The sound was like 1,000 tiny screams made of glass. Hermione had told Harry once that prophecies could drive a person mad if broken too close. Now Dumbledore's face tightened. "Stop!" he thundered. But even as he spoke, more spheres fell. The air filled with glittering shards and with whispers that made no sense. Moody shoved an Order member back from the falling shelf. Kingsley raised a massive shield. Snape's wand moved like a knife, slicing curses out of the air. Still, the shelves shook. The Death Eaters didn't care about the prophecy. They cared about the chaos it made. And in that chaos, they could slip away with what they wanted. Information. Time. A piece of the Sky Man. Dumbledore's eyes darted to a shelf and locked on one label as it trembled. A name. A prediction. Dumbledore's hand tightened on his wand. Then he turned away from it. He chose people over paper. That choice saved lives. It also meant the department stayed broken, and broken things let monsters in. Clark's breathing steadied. He focused on simple facts. Bellatrix was in front of him. 2 Death Eaters were behind. The arch was to his left, whispering. He could not let anyone go through it. He could not let himself be thrown through it. He could not let his fear make choices for him. He moved. Fast. He grabbed the two Death Eaters behind him one after the other, ripping wands from hands and tossing the men across the room. Not into walls, but into empty floor space where they would slide and groan. Bellatrix screamed, laughing again, and fired a curse straight at Clark's face. Clark turned his head at the last instant. The curse cut his cheek like burning ice. Clark hissed, eyes narrowing. His heat vision flared for half a heartbeat. Controlled, thin, not wild. He sliced the stone at Bellatrix's feet, making a crack that forced her to hop back. Bellatrix's smile turned sharp. "There it is," she whispered. "The monster under the hero." Clark's voice was low. "No," he said. "That's my control." Bellatrix spat a curse. Clark moved again, and a new voice filled the room like a cold hand. Not Bellatrix, not a Death Eater. A voice that made Clark's skin tighten even before he understood the words. "You don't belong." Clark turned slowly. A doorway had opened. In it stood a tall figure in dark robes, pale face like bone, eyes like red coals. Clark had never seen Voldemort before, but he knew what evil looked like when it stopped hiding. Voldemort smiled as if they were meeting at a party. "So," Voldemort said softly, "you are the one who brings hope." Clark's fists tightened. Voldemort's gaze drifted to the arch. "A door to death," he murmured, pleased. "How fitting." Clark's voice was steady. "You're Voldemort," he said. Voldemort's smile widened. "And you," he said, "are a stranger who thinks strength makes him safe." Clark did not charge. He had fought beings who could shatter planets. But this was different. This man did not feel like a body to hit. He felt like a plan. Voldemort lifted his wand slightly. Bellatrix stared at him in worship. Clark's hearing caught footsteps elsewhere, distant. Fighting. Shouts. Someone screaming. Clark's mind did the thing it always did. It counted lives. Voldemort spoke again. Voice silk. "I can send you home," he said. Clark's chest tightened. Voldemort watched it happen and smiled wider. "Yes," Voldemort whispered. "That matters to you." Clark's eyes hardened. "You're lying," he said. Voldemort shrugged. "Perhaps," he said. "Or perhaps you simply lack imagination." He stepped closer. The room seemed to get colder around him. "You cannot punch despair," Voldemort said softly. "You cannot lift a soul like you lift stone." Clark's jaw clenched. Voldemort's eyes glittered. "But you can be guided," he said. "You can be used." Clark's voice turned dangerous, not loud. "I don't get used," he said. Voldemort laughed, quiet. "Everyone gets used," he said. "The question is whether you notice." He flicked his wand. A spell hit Clark's chest like a chain made of ice. Clark stumbled. His muscles locked for half a second. Magic crawled under his skin. Clark grunted and forced his body to move anyway, breaking the binding through raw will and strength. Voldemort's eyes narrowed, interested. Bellatrix gasped like she was watching art. Clark's breath came harder. He could fight this. But every second he fought here was a second. Others might die elsewhere. Voldemort's gaze slid past Clark. "Bring him," Voldemort murmured to Bellatrix. Bellatrix's grin was wide. "Gladly," she sang. Clark's eyes flashed. He understood. This was not about killing him here. This was about dragging him through rooms, testing spells, learning his limits. Clark backed toward the arch without meaning to, then stopped sharply. No, not that. He planted his feet. Voldemort raised his wand again, and a blast of golden fire exploded into the room. Dumbledore strode through the doorway, wand lifted, eyes like ice behind calm. "Tom," Dumbledore said, voice steady. Voldemort's smile vanished. The air tightened like a rope. Clark felt the shift at once. This was the real duel, the kind that changed nations. Dumbledore's gaze flicked to Clark, quick and sharp. "Do not go near the veil," he said. Clark nodded once, breathing hard. Voldemort's voice was cold. "You protect him," Voldemort said to Dumbledore. "Why?" "He is an accident." Dumbledore's answer was simple. "So are most people," he said. "And yet, they matter." Voldemort's eyes narrowed. Then the duel began. Dumbledore's spells were light-shaped into walls and ropes up and shields. Voldemort's spells were darkness-shaped into knives and hooks. Clark watched, stunned. He had fought gods. But this was different. This was two minds trying to rewrite reality with sticks and words. Bellatrix tried to dart in. Clark moved and blocked her with his body like a door. Bellatrix fired curses at him and giggled when he flinched. Clark ignored her laughter and watched the veil. He kept it behind him, like he was guarding a cliff. A spell from Voldemort whipped toward Dumbledore. Dumbledore deflected it. The spell struck the stone near the veil instead. The cloth rippled. The whispers grew louder. Clark's stomach turned. Voldemort smiled as he saw Clark react. Dumbledore saw it too. "Clark," Dumbledore said sharply, still dueling, "look at me." Clark forced his eyes away from the veil. Dumbledore's gaze was steady, anchoring. "Breathe," Dumbledore said. Clark breathed. Voldemort's lips curled. "He fears it," Voldemort whispered. Dumbledore's voice snapped. "Enough." A burst of force slammed Voldemort backward through the doorway, not injured, forced away. Voldemort vanished in a swirl of dark smoke, retreating rather than risking being trapped here longer. Bellatrix shrieked, furious. "My lord!" Dumbledore's wand snapped toward her. A spell struck Bellatrix's wand hand. Her wand flew. Clark moved like lightning, snatched the wand out of the air, and crushed it in his fist. Bellatrix stared at the splinters, then at Clark. Her eyes were wild with hatred and joy. "This isn't over," she hissed. She disapparated with a crack, leaving the room shaking and full of whispers. Silence fell in a rush. Clark's chest rose and fell. His cheeks stung, his ribs burned. Dumbledore lowered his wand slowly. For the first time, Clark saw something heavy in Dumbledore's face, not fear. Cost. "We must leave," Dumbledore said, voice low. Clark nodded. "Where are the others?" he demanded. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "We find them," he said. They moved fast, back through the shifting doors. Clark's speed helped. He could scout, return, carry people. But the department fought him. Doors rotated, hallways shifted, rooms changed, and the Death Eaters used that. They didn't stay to win. They stayed to take pieces. When Clark finally reached the prophecy room again, it looked like a storm had hit it. Shelves were broken. Glass glittered on the floor like ice. Order members stood breathing hard, bruised, furious, alive. Harry, Hermione, and Ron stumbled in from a side door, cloak half off, faces pale. Hermione looked at Clark's cheek. "You're hurt," she whispered. Clark nodded once. "Magic," he said. Tight. Harry's scar throbbed and then eased, like something had pulled away. Dumbledore's gaze swept the room. So many broken prophecies. So many whispers still hanging in the air. Kingsley stepped close, voice urgent. "Horrors are coming," he warned. "The Ministry will spin this as an attack." Dumbledore's jaw tightened. Clark looked at the broken shelves. He understood the problem at once. They had not just fought Death Eaters. They had fought a story trap. And now the Ministry would choose the story it liked best. Dumbledore's voice was calm, but iron sat under it. "Then we leave," he said. "Before the Ministry cages truth again." Clark looked down at a torn edge of his cape. A thin strip had been sliced clean off near the bottom, not by accident. By a spell that cut cloth like a knife. He felt cold inside. They had taken a piece of him. Not to hurt him now, to study him later. Clark lifted his eyes to Dumbledore. "They're learning," he said quietly. Dumbledore nodded once. "So are we," he replied. Clark looked at Harry, Hermione, and Ron. His eyes were sharp now, not angry at them, but worried. "You followed," he said. Hermione lifted her chin. "We didn't mean to get in the way," she said. Ron swallowed. He began. Harry met Clark's gaze. "We're part of this war," Harry said, voice rough. "We don't get to pretend we aren't." Clark stared at him for a long second. Then he nodded once, slow. "I don't like it," Clark said. Harry's mouth twisted. "Neither do I," he said. Clark's gaze softened for a heartbeat. "Then we survive it," Clark said. "And we do it without becoming them." Above them, somewhere in the building, a door slammed. Footsteps thundered. Voices shouted orders. The Ministry was coming. Dumbledore turned. "Everyone," he said, calm and urgent. "Now." Green fire burst in the fireplace at the end of the corridor. One by one, they vanished into it, escaping the Ministry's hands by seconds. Clark went last. Before he stepped in, he looked back once at the broken prophecy shelves, at the glass on the floor, at the whispering air. He understood the new rule of this world. Here, the strongest man alive could still be pushed by lies, traps, and soul things. And Voldemort had just proven he knew exactly where to press. Clark stepped into the flames, and far away, in darkness, Voldemort held a thin strip of red cloth between two pale fingers and smiled like a man who had found the edge of a map. "Now," Voldemort whispered, "we write you into the story." Understood. 2 weeks passed, but Hogwarts did not relax. It felt like the castle was holding a long, angry breath. Aurors stood near the gates now. They wore dark robes and hard looks. They pretended they were there to help. But they watched the students like the students were the problem. Umbridge loved it. She walked the halls with new confidence, clicking her little heels like she was the sound of the law itself. Her decrees multiplied. More rules, more punishments, more smiles that never reached her eyes. Harry hated seeing fear dressed up as order. Clark kept moving anyway. Harry saw him most nights, standing on a tower ledge, cape tugging in the wind. He never looked bored. He looked like someone doing a job that never ended. Sometimes, when Harry couldn't sleep, he would step into a shadowed corridor and watch Clark from far away. Clark would tilt his head, listening. Then he would vanish in a soft gust of air. A minute later, Harry might hear a distant shout from a portrait, complaining about drafts, or Peeves screaming that a flying curtain had just scared him. Once, Harry actually saw the reason. A first year had tried to sneak out after curfew and slipped on a moving stair. The stair shifted. The boy's foot slid out. He started to fall into open space. Clark appeared, fast and silent, caught him under the arms, and set him back on the step like placing a book on a shelf. The boy blinked up at him, shaking. "Careful," Clark said quietly. The boy nodded hard, then ran off. Clark didn't chase him. He just watched until the boy was safe. Harry didn't know how to explain what that did to him. It made him feel protected. It also made him feel guilty. Like he had been carrying this war alone, and now someone else had put a shoulder under it without being asked. During the day, Clark kept trying to live inside Hogwarts rules. He asked permission before going anywhere. He didn't burst into classrooms. He didn't hover near windows like a guard drone. He tried to be normal. That was the funniest part, because it never worked. He began carrying a little pouch of wizard coins, because Ron had told him it was good manners to have your own money. Clark had stared into the pouch the way he stared at the Department of Mysteries. "So," Clark had said slowly, "the big gold one is worth—" "A lot," Ron had answered, "and the little bronze one is worth—" "Not much," Ron had said. Clark had looked at Hermione like he was asking for an equation. Hermione had sighed and explained it properly. "Galleons, sickles, and nuts," she said. "It's not logical. Don't try to make it logical." Clark had tried anyway. Harry had watched Clark try to pay a second year back for a broken quill by offering 3 galleons. The second year had nearly fainted. Ron had grabbed Clark's arm and hissed, "That's like paying someone with a whole suitcase." Clark had frowned, pulled out a sickle, then paused. "Is this still too much?" he'd asked, honestly worried. Harry had almost laughed out loud. A man who could lift a mountain, confused by pocket money. It was a small thing, but it made Clark feel real. Not a legend, not a weapon, just a person trying to fit. And the more real he looked, the harder the ministry pushed. The Daily Prophet didn't stop either. Every week it printed a new version of the same story. Sometimes Clark was a secret monster. Sometimes he was Dumbledore's private soldier. Sometimes he was the reason. Dementors were near the school, even though everyone who mattered knew the Dementors were being used. Harry saw Clark read these papers once in the library. He sat very still. He didn't tear the paper. He didn't shout. He just stared at the words like they were another kind of curse. Then he wrote in his notebook. Harry walked up and asked, "What are you writing?" Clark had looked up, surprised, like he thought Harry would be asleep. "Facts," Clark had said. "Will they print them?" Harry had asked. Clark's mouth had tightened. "Maybe not," he said. "But I still write them." That was how Harry knew Clark wasn't only strong, he was stubborn in a way that mattered. That same stubbornness was what Voldemort decided to break. In Malfoy Manor, the air felt clean and cold. It was the kind of clean that came from fear. No one dared leave dust. Voldemort stood near a long table. The strip of red cloth lay on it like a piece of a flag from a lost battle. Lucius Malfoy watched it with wide eyes. Bellatrix watched it like it was treasure. Voldemort didn't touch it at first. He didn't rush. He never rushed. "A fragment," Voldemort murmured. "A thread." He lifted his wand and traced a slow circle in the air. The cloth twitched. Lucius swallowed. "My lord," he said carefully. "Is it enough?" Voldemort's red eyes slid to him. "It is enough to begin," he said. Bellatrix leaned forward. "What will you do?" she breathed. Voldemort's smile was thin. "I will speak to him," he said, "and I will listen." He flicked his wand. The strip of cloth rose, floating. A pale light wrapped around it like fog. The room filled with a faint sound, like distant wind. Then, very softly, a heartbeat joined it. Not Voldemort's, not Bellatrix's. A steady, strong beat, far away. Lucius's face turned gray. "You can hear him," he whispered. Voldemort's smile widened. "I can reach him," he corrected. Bellatrix shivered with delight. Voldemort's voice lowered. "Not with fists," he said. "Not with fire. With his own feelings." He closed his eyes, and the magic pulled. That night, Clark stood alone on a tower, watching the grounds. The moon was bright. The Forbidden Forest was a dark mass of shapes. He listened to Hogwarts breathe, footsteps in corridors, owls far away, a student coughing in a dorm. He could hear it all. He tried not to. He tried to respect privacy. But his senses were always on. He pulled his notebook out and tried to write anyway. He wrote one line. "Hope is a choice." Then the wind changed. The air went heavy, like the castle had suddenly sunk. Clark's skin prickled. He turned his head. A voice spoke behind him, smooth as oil. "You miss home?" Clark spun. No one stood there. But the voice was real. He felt it in his bones, the way he felt magic spells when they hit him. His fists clenched. "I know who you are," Clark said into the empty air. A laugh answered, quiet and pleased. The air in front of him shimmered. Not a portal like he knew, more like a picture painted on air. And in that picture, Clark saw a small farmhouse under a wide sky. He saw a dirt road. He saw someone standing on a porch, a woman. Dark hair, a strong face, eyes that could cut through lies. Lois. Clark's throat tightened so fast it hurt. "Don't," he whispered. Voldemort's voice purred. "You see," it said. "I can show you what you want." Clark stepped forward without thinking, then stopped himself. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Magic could lie. He forced himself to breathe. "What do you want?" Clark demanded. The picture shifted. The farmhouse vanished. Now it was a city. Tall buildings, bright lights. A world Clark knew like his own heartbeat. Then it shifted again. Now it was Hogwarts. Then Hogsmeade. Then the Department of Mysteries. Shelves of broken glass, whispers in the air. Voldemort's voice stayed calm. "You are trapped," it said, "and you pretend you are not." Clark's jaw tightened. "I'm not trapped," he said. "You cannot go home," Voldemort replied gently, like stating the weather. "And you cannot win this war with strength." Clark's eyes flashed. "Watch me," he said. The picture changed again. Harry appeared in it. Harry stood in the Great Hall, alone, looking small, wand in hand, surrounded by shadows. Clark's whole body went tight. Voldemort's voice softened. "You care," it said. "That is why you will fail." Clark's teeth clenched. "Leave him out of this. Or," Voldemort said, "you could end it." The picture shifted. The shadows vanished. Hogwarts looked calm. Students smiled. No fear. "How?" Clark growled. Voldemort's voice was almost kind. "You stand aside," it said. "You don't interfere. You let me finish what I began." Clark stared at the calm image, and he felt the trap closing. "Then everyone loses their freedom," Clark said. Voldemort's laugh was quiet. "Freedom," it mocked. "What has freedom given them? Fear. Lies. Weak leaders." The picture changed again. Now the Ministry stood tall. Umbridge smiled. Aurors marched. Students bowed their heads. Voldemort's voice whispered, "They already live in a cage." Clark's hands shook, not from fear, but from anger. "Not my cage," Clark said. "Not yet," Voldemort replied. The picture shifted one last time. Now Clark saw himself. He saw a red cape, a strong body, chains of light wrapped around his chest and arms, magic chains, tight and burning. And behind him, Voldemort stood, wand raised, smiling like a man holding a leash. Clark's stomach dropped. That wasn't a vision of the future. It was a threat. Voldemort's voice turned soft again. "I can send you home," it said. "I can even remove the pain magic causes you. All it costs is your refusal to play hero." Clark stared at the empty air. His breathing slowed. He knew temptation. He had faced it in different forms. Fame, praise, power. The idea that if you control everything, no one gets hurt. It was always the same lie. Clark lifted his chin. "No," he said. The air went still. Voldemort's voice hardened. "No?" Clark's voice stayed steady. "You don't fix fear by becoming the fear," he said. "And you don't save a world by owning it." A pause. Then Voldemort whispered, colder now, "Then I will teach you what hope costs." The picture shattered like glass. The wind returned. Clark stood on the tower, heart pounding, staring into nothing. He touched his chest where the magic had pressed. Then he moved, not in panic, in purpose. He flew down toward the castle, fast but careful, like a guard who had just heard the first crack of an attack. The next morning, Umbridge announced a safety demonstration in the courtyard. All students were required to attend. Harry hated that sentence. He hated the word required in her voice. They lined up in rows. Teachers stood stiff at the edges. Aurors watched with hands near their wands. Umbridge stood on a small platform, smiling wide. Clark stood off to one side with McGonagall. He looked tense. Harry could tell something had happened to him. His eyes were sharper than usual. Hermione leaned close to Harry and whispered, "He didn't sleep." Ron muttered, "He never sleeps." "He does," Hermione whispered back. "Just not much." Umbridge raised her hands. "Today," she said brightly, "we will show the students what safety looks like." She gestured to two Aurors. They raised wands and cast a net of glowing lines into the air. The lines spread like a web. Harry felt the hairs on his arms rise. The web hummed. The air above the courtyard seemed heavier. Clark looked up. His jaw tightened. "What is that?" Harry whispered. Hermione's eyes narrowed. "Anti-flight wards," she whispered. "Or something like it." Umbridge turned toward Clark with her smile still on. "Mr. Clark has kindly agreed," she said, "to show us that he will follow ministry guidance." Clark's head snapped to her. His face stayed calm, but the calm had edges now. "I didn't agree to this," he said. Umbridge blinked, still smiling. "Oh, I'm sure you did," she said sweetly. "Perhaps you misunderstood the paperwork." Clark's hands clenched, then relaxed. "This isn't about safety," Clark said. "It's about control." Umbridge's voice turned sharper. "And if control keeps children alive, so be it." Harry saw Clark inhale slowly, like he was pulling his temper into a box. Then the air turned cold. Not like a normal cold day. This cold came from nowhere and grabbed everyone by the lungs. Students gasped. Some began to cry without knowing why. Harry's scar burned, sharp and hot. Dementors drifted over the courtyard wall, more than last time. A black wave of cloaks, silent and hungry. The Aurors froze. Umbridge's smile fell off her face like a mask. "Impossible," she whispered. "They're under ministry." A scream cut her off as a Dementor dipped toward a group of younger students. Panic exploded. Rows broke. Children ran. Teachers shouted orders. And through it all, the anti-flight web still hummed over the courtyard, like a net meant for the wrong target. Clark moved. He did not waste time arguing. He surged forward and scooped 3 students up at once, carrying them out of the Dementor's path. He landed near a doorway, set them down, and pointed. "Inside," he ordered, voice firm. "Go." They stumbled in. A Dementor swerved toward him. Clark's body stiffened as the cold pressed on his mind. He saw it again for a flash. Krypton burning. A baby rocket. A lonely farm. A world that could not be saved the first time. His knees threatened to buckle. Harry saw it. Harry raised his wand and yelled, "Expecto Patronum!" A silver stag burst out and charged straight at the Dementor. The Dementor recoiled, floating back. Clark sucked in a breath, like someone coming up from underwater. He looked at Harry for half a second. A silent, "Thank you." Then Clark turned back to the chaos. He moved like a rescue storm. He grabbed a fallen student and carried them to safety. He tore a broken stone bench out of the ground and used it as a shield, not against Dementors, but against stray curses from panicking Aurors. Because the Aurors started firing, not at Dementors, at shadows, at movement, at anything they didn't understand. One spell hit Clark in the shoulder. He grunted, staggered, then kept going. McGonagall screamed, "Stop firing at him!" An Auror shouted back, "He's unregistered!" Clark's head snapped toward the Auror, eyes blazing with anger he did not release. He didn't hit the Auror. He flew past and saved 2 more students who were trapped against the wall, frozen by fear. The Dementors pressed closer. Teachers began casting Patronuses. Silver shapes flickered into the air. Cats, birds, a lynx. Some held. Some failed. Umbridge stood on her platform, face pale, wand shaking. Clark saw a Dementor drift toward her. For one bitter second, he could have left her. Harry felt the thought in his own head, and hated himself for it. Clark didn't hesitate. He crossed the courtyard and placed himself between Umbridge and the Dementor. The cold slammed into him harder than before, like the Dementor could taste how much he hated this moment. Clark's breath hitched. Umbridge stared up at him, mouth open. She looked shocked that he would save her. Clark's voice was low, tight. "Run," he said. Umbridge didn't move. Clark grabbed her by the back of her cardigan, lifted her like she weighed nothing, and tossed her behind him, gently but fast, into the arms of a stunned Auror. "Get her inside," Clark snapped. The Auror stumbled, then obeyed. The Dementor drifted closer, hood lowering. Clark's fists clenched. He couldn't punch it away. He couldn't burn it. He couldn't fix despair with strength. So he did the only thing he could. He became time. He became distance. He shot upward toward the humming anti-flight web. The web tugged at him like sticky air. It tried to slow him, to pin him. Clark grunted, forcing through. The web was made for brooms and creatures, not for someone who could fight gravity like it was a suggestion. He broke through the top line with a burst of force that made the whole net shiver. Then he tore. He grabbed the glowing lines with both hands and ripped them apart. The web snapped, sparks falling like broken fireflies. The air above the courtyard opened. Teachers gasped. Aurors shouted in rage. But Clark didn't care. He dropped back down, faster now, and began moving people out of the open. Harry saw him carry 6 students at once, arms full, cape wrapping around them like a blanket. Harry saw him land, set them down, and immediately launch again. Then the real strike hit. A dark mark flared in the sky beyond the walls. Green smoke, a skull, a snake. Students screamed again. Death Eaters appeared at the far end of the grounds, just outside the courtyard, casting spells at the castle wards to weaken them. Bellatrix's laughter rang out over the stones. "There you are," she called, voice bright with cruelty. "Our flying hero." Clark's head snapped toward her. Harry saw Clark's shoulders tighten. Clark didn't charge. He looked at the students first. He made a choice. He flew straight through the courtyard, herding students toward the doors in fast, clean movements. He pushed a fallen archway stone aside. He blocked a curse with his own body. He carried a teacher who had been stunned. Then, when the last wave of students reached the doors, Clark turned and shot toward the Death Eaters. Bellatrix lifted her wand, eyes shining. "Come closer," she sang. "Come close so I can hurt you properly." Clark's eyes narrowed. He moved like a blur, disarming 2 Death Eaters before they understood he was there. Wands flew. Masks turned. Then Bellatrix struck him with something different. A curse that didn't explode. It latched. Clark felt it like a hook in his chest. He gasped. Pain flared through his ribs, sharp and deep, like the magic had learned where to press. Voldemort's voice whispered in his memory. "I can reach you." Clark's hands shook. Bellatrix's smile widened as she saw it. "My lord says hello," she purred. Clark understood. The cape fragment. The link. They were pulling on him through sympathy magic, like pulling a puppet string. Clark gritted his teeth. He forced himself forward anyway. Bellatrix fired again. The pain doubled. Clark stumbled. Harry saw it from the courtyard doorway and felt cold fear punch through him. Not because Clark might lose a fight, because Clark might fall at the wrong moment. And when Clark fell, people would die. Harry ran forward, wand up, shouting Patronus again to keep the Dementors back. Hermione rushed beside him, face hard, casting shield charms at students still trapped near the walls. Ron followed, jaw clenched, throwing stunners at masked figures near the gate. Clark looked back at them for a second, as if he was about to order them away. Then another wave of pain hit him. Clark's vision blurred. For a heartbeat, he saw Kansas again. He saw Lois. He saw the easy lie. Just stop fighting. Just go home. His knees bent. Bellatrix laughed, thrilled. Then a voice cut through the chaos. Not loud, not fancy, just honest. "Clark," Luna Lovegood said, stepping out of the doorway like she didn't understand fear's rules. "You're here." Clark's head turned. Luna's eyes met his. Calm, clear. "You're not in a picture," Luna said. "You're not in a trick. You're here, and we're here, and that means you can choose." Clark's breath hitched. The pain was still there. The hook was still there. But Luna's words were an anchor. Clark clenched his jaw and stood fully upright. Bellatrix's smile faltered for half a second, confused by something so simple. Clark's voice came out low and steady. "You don't get to steer me," he said. He didn't strike Bellatrix. He didn't rage. He changed the battlefield. He shot straight up into the sky, fast enough to make the clouds tear. Bellatrix snapped her wand up to follow. Clark dove back down behind the Death Eaters, landing with a shock that cracked the ground and threw them off balance. He grabbed the nearest masked man and hurled him over the castle wall, carefully, so he landed outside the grounds instead of splattering on stone. He did it again. And again. Not killing. Removing. Separating. Breaking the formation. Bellatrix screamed in fury and fired the pain curse again. Clark grunted, nearly falling. Hermione shouted, "Harry, cover him!" Harry's Patronus burst out again, driving Dementors away from the open field, giving teachers room to breathe. Hermione's mind moved fast. She spun toward McGonagall and yelled, "We need to break the link!" McGonagall's eyes flashed. "What link?" Hermione pointed at Clark, at the way he flinched at each curse like it was guided. "Sympathetic magic," Hermione yelled. "They took part of him in the department." McGonagall's face hardened. She raised her wand and shouted a sharp counter-charm, old and powerful. Snape appeared at the edge of the courtyard like he had been waiting for the right second. His eyes locked on Bellatrix. Snape's voice was cold. "You always did love toys," he hissed. He flicked his wand with brutal precision. A thin spell shot out, not a flashy curse, a cutting, severing kind of magic. Bellatrix's wand hand jerked. Her curse stuttered. For one precious moment, the hook in Clark's chest loosened. Clark sucked in a breath like someone freed from a chain. He didn't waste it. He moved. He crossed the distance and grabbed Bellatrix's wand wrist again. This time, when she tried to twist away, he didn't let her spin free. He pinned her wrist down to the ground with controlled force, not crushing, just locking. Bellatrix hissed up at him, eyes wild. "Do it," she spat. "Break me. Show them what you are." Clark stared down at her. His voice was quiet. "I'm not what you want," he said. He lifted her wand with 2 fingers and snapped it clean. Bellatrix's scream was pure rage. Then she disapparated in a crack of black smoke, escaping because someone like her always keeps an exit. The remaining Death Eaters retreated too, some dragged by their friends, some limping, some furious. The Dementors drifted back over the walls as the last Patronuses held them at bay. Slowly, the cold began to lift. Harry's arms shook from the strain. He lowered his wand, panting. Students stumbled out from doorways, wide-eyed, alive. Teachers moved through the courtyard checking for injuries. Aurors stood frozen, looking around like they couldn't understand how control had failed so quickly. Umbridge crawled out from behind a stone pillar, hair messy, cardigan torn. She looked like a person for the first time. She stared at Clark. Clark stood in the middle of the courtyard with scorch marks on his clothes and a thin cut on his cheek. His chest rose and fell. His eyes were tired, but he was still standing. and the whole school was looking at him now. Someone whispered, "He's like a superhero." The word spread in murmurs. Man. Harry looked at Clark and felt a strange twist in his chest. Hope again. Dangerous and bright. Clark turned his head slightly, listening to distant footsteps. More Aurors were coming. More Ministry people. More story makers. Clark looked at Dumbledore, who had arrived silently during the last moments of the fight. Eyes sharp, face calm in that way that meant he was furious inside. "What happens now?" Clark asked, voice low. Dumbledore's gaze flicked to the students, then to Umbridge, then to the Aurors. "Now," Dumbledore said, "they will try to claim this." Clark's jaw tightened. "And you?" he asked. Dumbledore's eyes met his. "We will not let them," he said. An Auror stepped forward, wand raised. "By order of the Ministry." Clark did not move toward the Auror. He moved away from him. He stepped back toward the students. A clear choice. He placed himself where he belonged, between danger and children. "I'm not your weapon," Clark said, calm and loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm not your prisoner either." Umbridge's voice shrieked, "You destroyed Ministry wards!" Clark turned his head toward her, eyes steady. "You put a net over a school during an attack," he said. "That's not safety. That's fear." For a second, nobody spoke. Even the Aurors looked uncomfortable. Dumbledore's voice cut in, gentle and sharp at the same time. "If the Ministry wishes to discuss this," he said, "it may do so through proper channels." Umbridge sputtered. This is a tantrum," McGonagall said crisply. A few students made small, shocked noises. McGonagall never said things like that out loud. Clark glanced at Harry, Hermione, and Ron. His eyes softened for a moment. Then he looked back at the gates. He could feel it. The war was changing shape again. Voldemort had tested a lever and learned it could move him. But Clark had also learned something. He didn't need to win every fight by force. He could win by refusing to become what Voldemort wanted. That refusal was its own kind of power. 3 days later, Hogwarts was quieter, but not calmer. The Ministry had tried to spin the attack. It had tried to say it was a security drill that went wrong. That lie didn't hold. Not after so many students had seen Death Eaters and the Dark Mark. People whispered the name Voldemort again, even if the Ministry hated it. And students whispered another name too. Not Clark, not Skyman. They whispered Superman. Harry heard it in corridors, in the library, in the Great Hall. Clark didn't correct anyone. He didn't advertise it. He just kept doing the work. He helped teachers repair broken stone with careful hands. He stood guard at night. He trained the DA in simple drills that weren't about fighting. "Exits," he said, pointing at a chalk map Hermione had drawn. "You don't win if you can't move people. First you save, then you fight." Ron raised a hand. "So you're telling us to run?" Clark looked at him. "I'm telling you to live," he said. Harry understood that. Later, Dumbledore met Clark in a quiet corridor lit by moonlight. "You were offered something," Dumbledore said, voice soft. Clark's eyes didn't pretend. "Yes," he said. Dumbledore waited. Clark's jaw tightened. "He offered to send me home," Clark admitted. Dumbledore's gaze stayed steady. "And you refused." Clark nodded once. "He can't buy me with my own longing," Clark said. Dumbledore's eyes softened. "That is a rare strength," he said. Clark looked away, toward a window that showed black sky and forest. "It doesn't feel like strength," he said. Dumbledore's voice was gentle. "Most real strength does not," he said. Clark was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I can't end him," he said. "Not like I end threats on my world." Dumbledore nodded. "No," he agreed, "because his life is scattered into pieces we must find." Clark's eyes sharpened. Horcruxes, he said, the word still strange in his mouth. Dumbledore nodded again. Clark's voice turned firm. Then I stay, he said. Not to rule. Not to be a symbol. To protect the people doing the work. Dumbledore smiled faintly. A guardian, he said. Clark's mouth twitched. Something like that, he said. And in the far distance, beyond walls and laws, Voldemort listened to the fear and the hope moving through the world like weather. He didn't rage. He planned. Because now he knew something else too. Hope had a face, and he intended to break it. The sunrise over Hogwarts was pale and quiet. Clark stood on the astronomy tower with his notebook in his hand. The air was cold, but not Dementor cold. Just morning. Cold. Below, the lake was still. The forest was a dark line. The castle woke slowly, window by window, like a giant opening its eyes. Harry stepped onto the tower and stopped a few feet away. Clark didn't turn at first. He had heard Harry coming long before the door opened, but he waited anyway, giving Harry the choice to speak first. Harry walked up beside him and leaned on the stone. For a while, neither of them said anything. Then Harry said, "Do you think he'll come again?" Clark's voice was quiet. "Yes," he said. Harry swallowed. "Do you think we can win?" Clark looked down at the grounds. A house elf crossed a path carrying a bucket. A raven perched on a ledge and tilted its head. "We can," Clark said, "but not fast, and not without losses we don't want." Harry's jaw tightened. "I hate that," he said. Clark nodded once. "Me too," he said. Harry looked up at him. "You were scared in that courtyard," Harry said. Clark didn't deny it. "Yes," he said.